Welcome back to another tabletop review. Today we'll be taking a look at the Bernardelli Vest Pocket 25 semi-automatic pistol. My wife and I attended a local gun show earlier this year where I found this Italian 1949 Bernardelli 25 caliber pistol. Now I'll admit, I'm a sucker for these little vest pocket pistols. I've collected a number of these tiny classic firearms over the years, like a 1908 Colt Vest Pocket and a 1970 Bauer 25. And I even have a modern Camp 32. I also have a bunch of 22 and 25 caliber Saturday Night Special handguns. Now, except for the Camp, they're all basically just novelty collectibles. I like them. I find their history and mechanics just fascinating. So I'm always on the lookout for these small weapons. Unfortunately, I also end up spending too much, and in my opinion, gun shows are not what they used to be for bargains. But here it is, the Bernardelli Vest Pocket 25 caliber pistol. So what was the attraction of this little Bernardelli pistol? First was its size. Of all the small center-fired pistols I owned at the time, there's no doubt that the all-stainless steel Bauer 25 had to be the smallest. And it's small, real small. But the Bernardelli Vest Pocket 25 could be argued to be smaller yet. It may be a little longer in length than the Bauer, but the Bernardelli is definitely slimmer, shorter, and lighter in weight. Second, it was made in 1949. I just love these old guns, especially well-made vintage guns. Third, while the Italian-made Bernardelli Vest Pocket 25 may not be considered rare, it's also not common to find either. Fourth, for its time, it was considered to be a very fine pistol. Fifth, the gun came with a really nice high-quality vintage German-made EIG cutlery leather holster. Sixth, it had the standard 6-round magazine, and it also had the optional 8-round extended grip magazine. And finally, the price was hard to pass up. A Godin by itself would be worth a little over $300, and this one was offered for $200, including the extra magazine and the leather holster. Okay, the gun looked clean enough, but I could tell from its action that it probably hadn't been oiled in decades. Unfortunately, the left grip was also cracked, and the safety was missing. But otherwise, the finish was okay, and the action seemed smooth enough, and the barrel was shiny and bright with clear rifling. I did a quick internet price check and checked for replacement parts. The parts I needed were available, and although replacing the safety wasn't going to be cheap, I offered $125, but we eventually settled on $175. I know, like I said, I usually end up spending too much. Now, let's make sure this gun is cleared first. By the way, if you enjoy this review, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Well, let's begin with some background. The Italian family Bernardelli has a history of manufacturing of firearms that dates back to 1631. The company is located in Gardone, Val Trompia, Brescia, Italy, which is where Beretta also began back in 1526, about 100 years earlier. The V. Bernardelli Company was known for its production of shotguns, and later during the early 1930s, Bernardelli manufactured a 10.4 Italian service revolver, which was their first handgun. During World War II, the company began manufacturing artillery fuses, production of which continued until 1986. After World War II, Bernardelli introduced its first self-loading pistol, the VP Vest Pocket model, which was based on the Walter Model 9, but it's considered by many to have been an improvement over the Model 9. The Bernardelli Vest Pocket, like the Walter Model 9, was an unlocked breech striker-fired 25 caliber or 6.35 millimeter pistol. Both came with 6-shot magazines, although the Bernardelli also had an optional 8-round extended magazine available. Both guns have 2-inch barrels and cocking indicators, and they have similar sear mechanisms, but otherwise the rest of the lockworks are different. For example, the Walter has an open top slide, whereas the Bernardelli has a full-length slide that covers the barrel. This Bernardelli Vest Pocket was produced in 1949, according to its date stamp here. And made in Italy, mark on the left side of the frame tells me that it was exported to the United States. The serial number can be found on the rear face of the grip tang, as well as on the underside of the slide, and hidden on the underside of the barrel mount. In 1961, Bernardelli also came out with its Model 60 pistol in .32 caliber, and in 1968 its Model 80 pistol in .22 or .380 ACP. Bernardelli also produced a .22 version of the Vest Pocket called the Baby, and in 1968 Bernardelli replaced both with its updated Model 68, which, as far as I can tell, was only a slightly improved version of the same gun. The Bernardelli Company was forced into bankruptcy in 1997, and its assets, brands, and trademarks were acquired by the Turkish company Sarsamez. And by the way, Sarsamez did reintroduce the Bernardelli Model 68 under its own name in 2009 as the Sarsamez P6. Today only shotguns are being made under the Bernardelli name. Usually at this point I bring up any movie connections I can find regarding these classic firearms. However, I couldn't find any that featured either the Bernardelli VP or the Model 68. Sorry, if you're aware of one, please let me know. This gun, of course, didn't come with any packaging, but as I understand, the Bernardelli Vest Pocket originally came in a simple cardboard box with one magazine, but I've also seen fancy wood boxes as well. As for specifications, the Bernardelli Vest Pocket is a .25 ACP single-action semi-automatic pistol. The gun is blued steel and the grips are plastic. There were black or brown plastic grips available. The barrel is 2 inches in length. Sights are fixed built into the top of the slide. Slide serrations on the rear of the slide are well defined. The safety is here, down for fire. The mag release is European style on the butt of the gun here, which is common on these small guns. The mag fits snugly and the release is stiff and requires a little prying to be released. Standard 6-round magazine is typical for these mouse guns. This one appears to be fairly well made. The extended 8-round magazine was an option, and it's a good option. Overall length is 4.17 inches. Overall height is 2.7 inches. Width is 0.81 inches. Unloaded weight, 9.21 ounces. Loading with .25 caliber snap caps. Trigger travel is short, breaking at probably about 10 pounds. Now, before I'll fire a used gun, I disassemble the weapon and thoroughly clean and oil it just to make sure it's safe and functions properly. That's especially important with these old used guns. I could tell this gun had only been carried and fired a bit, as the very light, slight muzzle wear would seem to indicate, but from what I could see, it hadn't been cleaned or oiled in decades. The takedown button over here was stuck solid and needed a bit of soaking in CLP to loosen it up even enough to work. Once apart, everything was so dirty that I'm not sure it had ever been cleaned. Soaking all the parts in frog lube revealed a lot of dirt, but a little gunpowder residue from what I could see. The parts showed minimal wear, no rust. My guess is this gun had been carried early on, but probably seldom fired and probably has spent the last half-century in someone's safe, nightstand, or desk drawer. Remember, this gun is over 70 years old. I find this gun's function to be nice and tight, although the slide feels a little gritty. Except for the cracked grips and missing parts, I couldn't tell much evidence that this gun had been handled or fired much. Although vintage, the condition of the holster suggested that it hadn't been used much and is likely much newer than the gun. I had ordered replacement grips, $35, and a replacement safety, $65, and those parts had arrived in time for me to take this gun along with me on my next range trip. By the way, I'm still searching for a safety spring, although the safety rides tight enough on its own that I'm not sure that really is all that terribly important. Obviously, like most .25 caliber mouse guns, the Bernardelli VP is basically just a get-off-me gun. With the .25 ACP round and the short barrel blowback action, the muzzle velocity is only 760 to 1100 feet per second, depending on the bullet weight. Effective firing range is only about 30 feet, and maximum firing range is about 75 feet. In addition, with its tiny frame and sights, it's best to remember this is strictly a close-up weapon, and it's difficult to expect much accuracy. Loading the 6-round magazine took a little effort, and the edges are sharp. The larger 8-round magazine was a little easier to load. I found later that the left side of the 6-round magazine had been bent in slightly, restricting feeding, but that was easy to reshape, probably due to over-tightening of the left grip screw. I only loaded 5 rounds at a time so as not to stress the magazines. Overall, the Bernardelli VP is nicely crafted for a firearm produced just after World War II. It appears well machined with parts that are nicely fitted. The blue finish is still fairly good. By the way, notice the amateurish head screw damage. A professional would have used a properly sized driver and guarded the screw. An unmarked replacement screw will cost about $8. Racking the slide was easy and rounds slid into battery as they should. This is a very small gun and my hands are large, so I could only get one finger around the grip using the 6-round magazine. Probably should have tried the extended round magazine at the range, but I forgot to take it with me. Unfortunately, I also forgot to turn on one of the cameras on my shots from the first magazine. Sorry. I took the new grips with me, but I thought I'd give the cracked grips a try. That was a mistake. I was on my 3rd shot of the 2nd magazine when the whole left grip just fell apart in my hands and caused a failure to fully eject the shell casing. I think I can see how the original safety and spring were lost. Good thing I had brought the replacement grips with me. With the new grips installed, the gun operated smoothly again. So let's talk a little bit about cons. To me, the Bernardelli Vest Pocket 25 is actually a fine product of an easy-to-conceal gun that was popular during its day. Perhaps not as nice or popular as the Baby Browning or the Colt Vest Pocket, but a step above the Walther Model 9 upon which it was based. The Bernardelli VP is a fairly decent little pocket pistol. Most of what I see on the internet, which is not much, has been pretty favorable in terms of rating the construction, function, and reliability. But misfires, light strikes, and failures to feed complaints are out there. My personal gripes with the Bernardelli begin with its size. For me, it's just a little too small, especially with its 6-round magazine. And given its overall size, you'll probably wonder why they even bothered with these tiny built-in sights. Also, cracks on the left grip around the screw hole due to the pressure of the internal safety leaf spring are common. I consider that issue a significant design flaw and certainly a major con. Perhaps a lighter spring or thicker grips or an additional hold-down screw in the right location would have been helpful. And beware the replacement grips, which are at least available, may require a little modification to fit properly. I had to use a small file to carefully enlarge the screw hole, and I had to shave off a bit around the inside where the safety lever attached on mine. And the markings are not quite an exact match for the original. The European style heel magazine release is typical of these little guns, and it's one that functions well enough, although its tiny size makes its operation a little awkward. And because the gun is so small, manipulating the safety is also a little awkward for someone with large hands like me. Takedown of the Bernardelli VP is easy enough, but I suggest a little caution as parts are small and can get easily lost. Which brings me to the cost and availability of parts. Something to consider for an old gun like this, because if you tend to actually carry and use it for defense, inevitably you'll need to replace springs and other things. It could become an inexpensive or even impossible initiative due to availability issues. The extended magazine sounds like a good idea, but the magazine release is difficult to operate because it's almost entirely hidden by the plastic extension. That's not good, but what's worse is that the extended magazine does not seem to lock into place very firmly and can drop out enough when shooting to disable the gun. Okay for range activity, but not good if you're depending on this gun for defense. Finally, as I've said in other videos on 25 caliber guns, my opinion is that the 25 caliber round is really inadequate as a defensive caliber. If you're going to carry for defense, be aware that although it might be more reliable than a rim-fired .22, ballistically, it's not much of an improvement. Some argue that there's no improvement at all, but there's no denying it's certainly an expensive round and becoming increasingly harder to find. Therefore, the cost and availability of ammunition for this gun is an obvious con. And because of its short barrel, don't expect much in the way of accuracy from this gun, although I found this one to be surprisingly good. Now, as for pros, I've certainly pointed out a lot of cons about the Bernardelli Vest Pocket 25. What about pros? Well, let's take a look at one of its absolute major features, its size. I know I just said size was a con, but yes, but you know, you've got to give credit where credit is due, and the Bernardelli VP is one of the smallest automatics ever produced. Certainly there are a number of 22 caliber really small mouse guns out there in the form of Derringers and revolvers, but the Bernardelli VP is right there with some of the smallest semi-automatic pistols ever. Although I would have to give the title of smallest ever produced to the Walther Model 9, upon which the Bernardelli VP was based. The Bernardelli would, in my opinion, be in a three-way tie with the Baby Browning, the Bauer 25 for second place. Basically, for deep cover concealment, it would have been an excellent choice. If you can't conceal this little gun, you're simply not trying. Now, it also has to be acknowledged that the Bernardelli VP was fairly well made for its time. This one is tight, operates smoothly, and its finish is still in good shape for its age. The action is very smooth, delivering reliable performance, no complaints. As I've said in other reviews, I really like these old guns that are well designed and well made and actually work like they're supposed to. Other than the failure of the cracked left grip, this Bernardelli VP was functioning very, very nicely throughout my activity with it. And I like its looks. I like the cocked indicator button here. The takedown and reassembly are indeed simple procedures. And I also think the extended magazine was a cool option, very practical. And I was surprised to find a fairly good selection of replacement parts for the Bernardelli VP, although I'm still searching for that safety spring. By the way, it's been suggested that I should just do away with the safety altogether as long as I only carry the gun in a holster. Many people, like my wife, won't even carry a gun with a safety anyway. But this gun is a collectible for me, and I like to resort to its original configuration if I can. As for disassembly, make sure there's no cartridge in the chamber and the magazine is empty. Then pull the trigger to release the striker. Remove the magazine. Press the takedown button on the left side of the frame behind the grip. The bolt should slide back under spring tension, but you may have to pull it back manually. Pull the slide back slightly and lift up the rear and ease it off the front of the frame. And you can remove the guide rod and the spring from beneath the barrel. You can also remove the firing pin and spring from the slide. Note that the Bernardelli's disconnector is a sickle-shaped lever on the left side of the gun, which is depressed by the slide when it moves toward the rear. Pay attention to this placement because it's likely to fall off. And that's it. Reassembly is basically the same steps in reverse. Returning the disconnector, return the firing pin and the spring, return the guide rod and spring, return the slide to the frame, push the takedown button back in, and check for function. And that's it. Now, before we end today's video, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe down below. And thanks for watching. As for price, the production of the Bernardelli VP 25 ceased more than 50 years ago, and although not considered rare, neither are there many of these guns out there, so getting reliable information on their value is a bit difficult. Even TrueGunValues.com advises that there's too little data available to provide an average value today. But I was able to find a little recent national sales data which suggests that the Bernardelli VP in average condition would sell for about $375. Therefore, if you see one in good condition for about $300, I'd say that would be probably a pretty good price. So perhaps I did okay on my purchase of this one at $175, given its condition at the time. Now a few words about holsters. The Bernardelli VP fits nicely into any of my smallest holsters, allowing for several carry options, but it fits perfectly in the vintage leather German EIG cutlery holster that came with the gun. I have to say, this holster is really excellent and in very good condition. I estimate its value to be about $60. So in summary, this Bernardelli VP is just a nice little pistol. Being more than 70 years old now, this one is still in good condition. It required replacement of its safety lever in its left side grip, and it still needs a safety leaf spring to be 100%. But its fit and finish are good, and its function is very good. These are not common guns, but they are held in high regard, so I think its value should hold over time. Well, as I said in the beginning of this review, the Bernardelli VP appeals to me more for its novelty and collectible merits. It's not a gun I would seriously consider carrying for defensive purposes, but I think it's well made and a fine little pistol overall. Actually, I'm impressed enough with the condition and the function of this particular gun that I wouldn't hesitate to take it to the range occasionally for just the enjoyment of firing this classic little pistol if I can ever find 25 auto ammo I can afford. Any weapon you carry is better than the one you left at home. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll be back for my next tabletop review. Until next time, stay safe.